Hey guys, welcome to the Solution Architect channel. In today's video, I'm going to show you an end-to-end pipeline, fully automated, from checking in code to source control, to build, package, to configure, to deploy, and then do a smoke test. But I'll go into detail on what technology I used for this. It took me a little bit longer. There was a lot of other things going on, and at the moment I know the coronavirus is on everybody's lips. Luckily, we're IT people, can work from home. I just want to urge everybody to be safe out there. Look after yourself and your family. Keep your social distance, and we'll get through this, I'm sure. While this is going on, we can still code, and this is something we can create and get out of the normal news. So let me jump into the pipeline. So as you can see, I used Visual Studio Code and C# to create a simple web API. The web API also include XUnit testing for just a test, run to test on the API to make sure the API is working. I used a local Git for source control, and then Azure repos for remote source control and for the integration to kick off the integration build. I used .NET Core as the libraries. In this version, I used 3.1, and I used Docker Container to put this web API into a container. Then I used XUnit for testing. I also added Resharper. There's a lot of other things you can add to look at the quality of your code. Resharper works quite nice with C#. And then also, just to configure the container, I used Azure CLI for command line, and then I also used Docker to build and push the container to the ACR, which is Azure Container Registry. And then I used batch to configure some scripting before I ran a Python application to call the web API and to make sure it's up and running. And I used Azure platform to deploy everything. So let's jump into this. I'll take you through everything from code to smoke testing, and then I'll run the pipeline from the beginning to the end. I'll speed it up so this video is not too long. So let's jump into this. Okay, so now we're in Visual Studio Code. I've got two projects here. I created a solution that reference these two projects, and I've got the web API, DevOps Web API project, and it's got its startup file. I don't think I made any changes in here. So if you create a 3.1 web API, the new version 3.1 will create you a weather API. I actually deleted that. I've done no changes in the code on startup and programs on here. What I did do is I added a new C# file for a controller, and this controller simply just the simple get just gets numbers, and the simple get will just get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then a get with passing an ID will return that ID. So if you haven't got a valid ID or just a number, so it will turn, if you say 1 case, and it will turn 1. This is just to show you how web API works. I could have made it much more complex, but I just wanted to keep it simple. So when you call this get numbers and you pass a 5 through, it will return a 5. So this is the code. Very simple, nothing yet to really worry about. I also have a Docker file here. Don't worry about the Docker Compose. I didn't use Docker Compose to compose the Docker image, but I used the Docker file here. I've set this to latest. There's a reason for that. I'll show you in the pipeline. I also use port 5000 just to make sure we are conform. You can use any port you want. And I added this piece of code here. What you need to make sure when you generate a project where there's two projects in a solution, this Docker file, when you auto-create a Docker file, the working directory needs to be just the source. It will add additional things, your project structure, it will add it to here, but when you actually deploy it on Azure DevOps, it doesn't really see it unless you go and change. I wanted to keep it simple, and when I build my Docker file, it actually only look inside the Azure platform and only looks at the default folder where this project is being deployed. So this is the code, and this is the Docker file, and then I added a test as well. So added a test file. So this is important. So if you have .test, this is what Azure will look for. It will look for a project called .test, and then it will find this project tests, and it will run your C# file. So I've got two tests in here. I've got a constructor here, and the constructor will just set up the we use test hosting, and test hosting will just instantiate a test server, and it will simulate what you normally will do on a web API if you want to call a web API. So I've got two tests in here just to get the numbers and to get the value if you pass through a specific value, and that will return a 2. Just make sure that it's a 2 that you pass in. So there's your value, your inline data that you pass through. So this is just to make sure that the web API is running as expected, and this is the unit test that will be carried out on the build pipeline. So now let's jump into the Azure side. Okay, so I am now inside portal.azure.com. If you go to portal.azure.com, just ignore this DevOps Web API. This was part of my deployment, and you need to create a container registry. Your container registry is where all your repositories will be deployed to. And you can have multiple repositories and different types of repositories, one for Windows, one for Linux, and that's what I've got here. So in this repository here, ignore this one. This one was my Linux one. This is my Windows repository for my container, and this was deployed, and this is the image that's deployed. Now you want to use this image inside, so you need to have your DevOps registry information. If you click on access keys, I'm not going to do it right now, you'll find your username and password that you can connect to your registry. There's other ways of connecting. You can use token, but inside your DevOps platform, you need to create a service connection to this registry. So we'll jump into that quickly. Okay, so let's go through the pipelines. I'm going to go through, this is my repos and all my files. You'll see that what I didn't show you, I've got a PS1 file, which is my Python file, but I'll go into more detail on the Python file testing my web API. That's my smoke test. You've got your DevOps web API and your test that was checked in here. So this has been explained in my previous video, but I want to go into the pipeline itself and show you the build and the release pipelines that I've set up. This is my release pipeline, my build pipeline, sorry. Yeah, so I just moved my ugly face down there. If you go edit, let me show you all the tasks that I created for build process. So we've got the normal out of the box restore, build, and then I added the Resharper code. The Resharper code, if you add a new task, for example, let me just show you. It's going to be under Marketplace. So you just look for Resharper. You'll see that it will come, mine is already added, but it will come under Marketplace, and you can just, this is installed, or you can just get it for free. You don't have to pay for this. And then when you're here, you just add it in here. Now, I'm not going to do that right now because I've already got that. The only setting that you have to do, it's quite easy. You just select your project file. So you click there and go into your project file. And then I selected the severity of the fail build on error. It's important to note that when you start off and the first time that you're checking your code, put it on warning. It's going to kick off a lot of things for you that is even generated by the build .NET Core build process, and it made mistakes by not using, there's a lot of using libraries that you need to take out. It's not being used within your code. So this might be a little bit frustrating. It does take a little bit longer to run your pipeline when you added this, but this is very, very important to do your code quality checks inside here. And this will do it automatically for you. There's no additional settings that you have to change. And change just this to error when you're ready and say, okay, now I've cleaned up my code a little bit with all the warnings. The advanced option here, don't do any changes in here. And if you want to disable this, you're busy testing your pipeline, you can just click the enable off, and then you can disable this piece of task from the pipeline. And then there's test here that, like I said earlier, this will check your test. It will build and publish your artifacts, make it available. So this is your build process, and let's jump into the release process. So you'll see there's a little bit errors here. I played around a bit, but this was just a test area for me. The one that I want to look at is create and start the container. I'm going to edit. Now, your artifacts that I use, the artifacts is the source code itself, because inside the release pipeline I build and I push the Docker image to the Azure Portal with my first task here, and I need to do that from the source control. So you can select, so when you select this, then you select it from the source control. You'll see this lightning button up here. When you click that, and I haven't got that enabled here, if I enabled it like this and save it, every time there's new code that's checked in, and we'll do that, we'll run through that quickly, then this will automatically run when your build process is successful. If not, then it will throw an error and it will not deploy to your portal. So the first task here that I've got is build and push the Docker task. I showed that also in a previous video, and the only thing that you need to do here is just Docker file will be in a different location, so you just need to go and search for it. Click there, you go inside here, your Docker file might be inside here, and where your Docker file is. And remember, I said the structure of this will run the Docker file inside this folder, and that's why you need to change your Docker file before you check it in. The only other change I made is I use the latest stack. If you don't do this, it will create multiple instances of the images on site Azure Container. I just use latest, so when I build and push, it will just override that inside my Azure portal. So this is your first task. The next task here, let me go back. The next task is to create and start the container. I also showed you in a previous video where I use Azure CLI command line to create the instance of the container. This is quite important that I've added inside this part of the video, or this part of the session. I added a DNS name. Now the reason why I want to use a DNS label is so that I can run my smoke test. If I didn't have this label, now I'll show you the label just now inside what it is called when it's deployed, but you have to use a DNS label. If you don't do that, it will create a public IP for you automatically, and you want a public IP. If you don't set the public IP, you cannot run the test, say for example from Postman from your local PC. This is not very secure, so it's not in a secure network. If you do run things inside a production environment, I would really suggest you use a virtual network, but that costs money. That's why I'm not using it, and I'm doing this for free. But you shouldn't be using a public unless you have OAuth with credentials implemented, and you can use that to connect to your API. The port 5000 is going to be available, and then, like I said, the additional thing I've added here was just a DNS label name. And this is my CLI. The last part of the is after this instance is created, we want to go to the smoke test and then run a smoke test. The first task I've added is it is out of the box. So if you click here, you can actually just, all you do, type in a Python, and you need to install the Python version. What this will do, and this will install Python version on this agent. So if you click on the agent job, remember you need to change your agent to if you use 3.1, I would suggest use Windows 2019. I'm sure it will still work on Win 2016, but I use this and it's guaranteed to work. You might have problems if you choose any of the other Windows environments. And Windows 2012 is going out of support soon. So this agent, so what it means is everything runs inside here will run on this agent. So first of all, you install your Python. I just said 3.x, it comes out default anyway. So the bash script, this is just a bash script that will install a request, pip install request. So the reason for that is inside the Python script that I will show you right now after this, is it needs to call a web API, and we use RESTful services for that. So you need to have requests, and requests is actually to be able to send requests to a RESTful service. Then you add a new task, just a Python task script. So that is also one of the default tasks that you can select. And then you select your script. Inside here, you can select the file path and the script. And I've just put the script into the default folder where the solution is. You can put it anywhere. It doesn't really matter. And then it will execute the script and complete your smoke test. And I'll jump into the script right now. So we're in Visual Studio Code, and you can see here I just on the main folder just added container status check.ps1, which is my my Python script. I import requests. That's the pip that you installed, and then this is my main method, and this is just calling the main method, and this is just a try catch or try accept. To raise an exception. We want to do that if something's wrong. That will raise an exception. The URL, API URL is the URL that I showed you earlier, the DNS name. DevOps Numbers API is my DNS name that I created. I use Northern Europe. I also use Azure Container.io. That this is going to be your default. So you will use, say, if you are Western Europe or India or USA, you'll use your one that you use, and then .azurecontainer.io, and then also add 5000. That's the port you want to call. Inside my response, I just add the URL, and at the back there, the numbers method and sender 1. And I didn't need to do that. I just could run the simple get. If there's an error, so the error code, the status code is 200 when everything is okay. So that will return an okay. If not, it will return a different status code, and you'll raise that exception, and you'll see that inside your DevOps pipeline when something has failed from the code. What I will do now, I'll check in some code, and I'll run this process automatically and speed up this video quite quickly so we can get to the end. Okay, so the job has run end to end successfully. You can see that. And even though my smoke testing was just to call the web API, just to show you, I'm going to open Postman now and create a new basic request. I call this web API DevOps. And I'm going to put in the URL here. Inside my Python, I'm just going to copy this. This was my URL. And going back here, my URL numbers 1. Yes, I could have put it in the header. I just want to make it, just keep it simple. And there's 1 coming back. So if I change that header to 2, it should become 2. If I say anything that's not on here, and I cater for that, it'll be no valid ID. And this is calling from my local desktop to the Azure cloud. Now, because you made it public, anybody can actually call this API. So you need to build in security to do that. I'll probably care about do security in some of my other videos, but I wanted to get to some of the videos that you guys actually asked me to work on, and I'm going to look at Apache on Linux, and I'm going to look at MySQL. I think it's MySQL. So I'll put that in a few videos coming in the next week or two. Thanks so much for watching, and please subscribe if you haven't done that yet. And please click the notification button. If you like my videos, please share. Thank you very much and keep safe. I'll see you next time.